welcome to a special screening of Insert Coin right here on Big Screen. My name is Dan Amrick, and I am fortunate to be the host for today's pregame show, I suppose. We are joined by two very cool people who both have something to do with the film. The person that snickered when I called him cool was Josh Sway. He's the director and executive producer of this film. Hi, Josh. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me. I didn't think you could hear my snickering. Sorry about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I could even in VR, I can hear your snickers about yourself. You are cooler than you think. And the person that everybody knows is cool is Ernest Cline. You know him as the author of Ready Player One, Ready Player Two. Hi, Ernie. Nice to meet you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We are going to watch this documentary today, so hope you enjoy it. But we want to give you a little bit of context before we get there. This is the documentary that talks about the 90s era of Midway, more or less 10 years of one of CoinOp's greatest developers and greatest success stories, a really fertile creative period for arcade culture in general. And Josh, you made this film because you worked at Midway. You were an art team member, an art director on a lot of the games that are in this, but you also traced it back to cover sort of the beginning of what you saw as the key era for Midway history. I think my first question is, I'd like to know, when did you stop looking at this as your career path and as something that you wanted to document as a film? When did you realize this was a story instead of just your resume?
Yeah, I think really what it came down to was, I had been working in games for a really long time, and I was just starting to get burned out, and I felt like I really needed to do something else. And just even if it was just something to distract me, for a year or two. And I actually went to film school, and I felt like after many, decades of game development, I never got a chance to make a movie. And so, I thought to myself, well, I would like to make a film. I love documentaries, and I got to live this incredible period of time in game development. Why not see if this is the right subject matter for it? And so I kind of went into it more casually than anything else, but then it kind of obviously blew up from there.
I mean, this took you how many years, and how long? You did this through Kickstarter, for one.
Yeah.
But at what point, when you got into Kickstarter to fund the film, how long had the film been in development, or at least in gestation at that point?
I think, I'd been thinking about it for probably a good 6 months before the Kickstarter campaign. And really the purpose of the Kickstarter was really to see if there was something there. I wasn't, because I was afraid that it might be a subject matter that I'm only interested in because I kind of lived through that. So I kind of used the Kickstarter as a way to just kind of kick the tires to see if there was enough interest in it. So that was back in 2015. And at the time, I thought it was only going to, I was going to make a small film, get it done in maybe a year or two. And, lo and behold, almost 5 years later, I finally finished it up. So it kind of blew up, from my original intentions.
So, Josh, that's how you got involved, because it was all your idea. Ernie, how did you meet Josh, and how did you wind up being interviewed for the documentary? When did you get involved?
I think it was maybe 2017 or 2018. Josh sent me an email, and the only time I ever actually hung out with Josh in person was when we were filming that one day. We've hung out online a bunch, but that was I think he flew down to Austin, and he rented out a local arcade, like a private arcade, and we filmed there. And but Josh told me he had in my second novel, Armada, at the beginning, there's a quote from Eugene Jarvis, one of his famous quotes: "The only legitimate use of a computer is to play games," which I always love that quote, and I use it at the beginning of my book. And Josh saw that, and he's like, "Oh, this guy must be a Midway fan." So he reached out to me, and that's how it all happened.
So you guys were able to just get that in one afternoon, basically shooting you rented out the arcade?
Yeah. Josh would tell you
awesome.
How he rented it out, but yeah,
it's like every boy's dream.
Yeah, no, it was funny because I like Ernie said, I contacted him, and Ernie, he was so nice to say, hey, you know what, if you can come down to Austin, I can give you a couple of hours, and we're gonna chat. It was like fantastic. I was just I like immediately booked tickets and got everything ready, and Ernie actually suggested this one arcade, so I contacted them, and they were super excited about it. and so they basically put it together. They were closed that day anyway, so we got a couple of hours in there, and and I thought I was gonna come down. We had 2 hours, but I think we actually talked for almost 4 hours when we were down there. It was like way longer than what we planned. But we just completely geeked out and just started just talk about everything under the sun.
Yeah, and I brought my DeLorean down, and we posed for pictures with the DeLorean. There was constantly a crowd gathering outside around the car, but yeah, it was a fun day. And then afterwards, I was nervous. I was like, oh man, I probably said some stuff I shouldn't have. I hope Josh doesn't use all of that, and he didn't. He was kind. He took out some of the rambling that I did.
Well, who knows what's going to be on the extras of the Blu-ray and the outtakes?
Yeah, those deleted scenes are going to come back and bite me in the ass.
No, I'll tell you though. I mean, I knew, Ernie knew a lot about video games, but I wasn't ready for just the sheer amount of information that came in, and we started, and I was just like, oh yeah, I should have expected this, but we, especially when we started talking about the 80s era games that Union Jarvis did, Defender, Robotron, things like that. I mean, it was just, I have so much footage just from that alone. But I'll tell you, having Ernie come onto the film, it really changed the personality of the film, because up until then, it was really a bunch of developers talking and everything, and having Ernie come in and hearing his point of view as both a fan of the games, but also somebody who knows that era really well. And we almost, as game developers, we almost like call them civilians. It's kind of like, oh, that's what it was like that's what the customer was like. That's what they were thinking. We had no idea. So that was really refreshing. And that kind of helped me to pursue interviewing more people outside of just the developers.
It was I'm sorry. It was also a chance for me to air my long-held grudge about Smash TV. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to get to talk about Smash TV in a documentary, and the guys who made it are going to get to see it, and I can finally tell them, how I feel about what they did. It was too good to pass up. I used to own a Smash TV cabinet, and I love that game so much. I had it in my kitchen, like in the breakfast area, and would play it constantly. And that was when I talk about upgrading the version with ROM chips. That was with that Smash TV. And so Williams and Midway are big part of my life, a big part of my arcade fandom. So it's a natural fit.
Well, I mean, you actually have the honor of kicking off the film. I think it's kind of funny because we're talking about, because we all know the film, but everybody watching this is about to see the film probably for the first time. Ernie, you get to kick it off with sort of, as you pointed out, Josh, that sort of civilian perspective. And I do think that's one of the things that the film does well, is it balances, this is what we were thinking inside Midway, with this is what people were reacting to outside Midway, so that people can really understand kind of the cultural impact that some of these games had. But one of the things that is very clear from the film is that you point out that every time you guys were allowed to take a big risk, a big creative risk, the success of that game would lead to the next game being able to take even bigger creative risks. I thought that was very interesting, and to a certain extent, that's going to lead you down just creatively dead ends. So were there anything while you were working at Midway that you were aware, like, wow, Smash TV let us do this with Mortal Kombat, and Mortal Kombat let us do this with NBA Jam, and so on and so forth? Were there blind alleys? Were there projects that you thought should have or could have come out that would have changed the company's fortunes, either for better or for worse?
Yeah, I think, there were a lot of games that got canceled. Like, one of the things about arcade games was that they were really inexpensive to make. And so in the case of Midway, they would they would have teams just making all kinds of different games. It wasn't mandated by management or anything like that. It was just like, if a group of people wanted to make a game, they went off and did it because it didn't really cost much to do. But because of that, there was a lot of experimentation. But what would happen is that when those games would go out on test, if they didn't earn enough quarters in a certain amount of time on test, then they would get canceled right away, because it was, because they were cheap, they were easy to start, but because they were cheap, they were also easy to get rid of and cancel. And so a lot of times, a lot of games were not allowed to mature properly. And so, there, like at one point, Midway had the Highlander license, and they were going to do a Highlander sword fighting game.
Oh,
Yeah, I
I
know,
did
right?
not know that. It's been one of my
Yeah,
dreams.
yeah. So and this was going to be using the Mortal Kombat engine and things like that. And it was one of those things where they got a prototype of it going up to a certain point, but it wasn't going to feel right for a long time. But when it goes out on tests, or people might have some different agendas that they don't want another fighting game to succeed, then they would get canceled right away. And so there were a lot of games like that just didn't mature properly. One of the best stories was from Eugene Jarvis. This was right after Narc, and it isn't in the film, but he talks about how one of the designers on Narc was one of the few women designers at Midway at the time, or Williams at the time. And after Narc, she proposed wanting to do a game where you run a farm. You're growing a farm over time and stuff. And it turned out that she was basically talking about Farmville, And so Jarvis, says like, yeah, had we listened to her, Midway might still be around because we would have had this
Right.
massive hit called Farmville. But that was just
Wow.
the kind of the mentality at the time.
But there seems like you were pretty much allowed to follow your muse. Whatever crazy idea came up, sure, throw it against the wall, try it, because as you said, it's very affordable. Like, put a small team of most of the games that are shown in the film. It feels like there's a core team of, 2 people, a programmer and a designer, and then you would sprinkle in maybe 5 or 6 other people for sound and art and various other elements. How big was the average arcade dev team as you think of it?
I mean, in my time I was there, I don't think I was ever on a team that was larger than 6 core people.
Wow.
And so the Mortal Kombat game, the first Mortal Kombat was really only 4 people. NBA Jam was, I think, maybe 4, maybe 5 people.
Wow.
So they were very small teams, but the scope of the games were a lot smaller. And you look at the budgets for these games, they were super low. Everything was homegrown. There were, and Midway manufactured their own cabinets. It wasn't like they were getting cabinets shipped in from China or anything. So everything was very inexpensive. And but yeah, and for arcade games, that that was fine. But then when Midway, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here, but when Midway started getting into the home game, that's where that arcade DNA kind of held them back.
Right, because it's a completely different player expectation, and there's completely different value, and suddenly you have to put in a lot of dev time, a lot of dev resources, and then of course you also have to worry about manufacturing on a completely different scale.
Exactly.
A popular arcade game would have sold 3,000 units, 10,000 units tops.
I mean,
am I off?
No. I mean, a moderately successful game, arcade game, would sell around like 10 to 20,000. Now You're talking about each machine is about $4,000, so that's a huge return. But then you get Mortal Kombat, which sold almost 50,000 units. NBA Jam is the same way. Defender, I think, sold over 75,000 units or something to that effect. So I mean, these it was huge money for such little investment.
Right. So one of the things I think Midway is probably known for overall, for better or worse, and John Hay says in the documentary, one of the sound guys, he says, Midway was often accused of pushing the boundaries of poor taste. Midway games were often controversial. You had everything from the concept of just, in NBA Jam, pushing people over, which you would never find in the pro leagues. And of course, you have things like Smash TV, which is hyper gory all the time, and you have Mortal Kombat with the infamous fatalities and stuff. But I would argue that the controversy is what turns people's heads, but it's not connected to staying power. To a certain extent, shock value is not the same as stick-to-itiveness. But here we are, and you've built an entire film around this, and people like Ernie and I are still playing the games all these years later. This is the big question, the lightning in a bottle question. Like, what is it that made these games, even though they got your attention with something shocking or surprising or just downright silly in some cases, why are we still playing them now? This is really a question for both of you. Because I'm curious to know what you feel makes an arcade game worth playing 30 years after it was made.
Well, for me, a lot of it's nostalgia. I mean, there's clearly like games with better graphics and that are deeper and had huge development teams of hundreds of people. But there's no nostalgia unless even if it's like a newer version of Mortal Kombat or a reboot of an old favorite game. I think that draws people to a game. But sometimes you just want to go back and play the classics. And the way that I always describe it is, for me, like there's that saying, you can never go home again, because you go back to your home and it's changed and you've changed and it's not quite like you remember it. But when you go back and play a video game that you played back in the day, it is exactly how you remember it. And the way that it looks, the way that it sounds, the way that you play it, and it's like a time machine. It takes you right back to that time in your life that you used to, just feed endless quarters into these games. So I think for me, it's like a time capsule. It's a place that you used to go and hang out, that a bunch of people that from your generation used to go and hang out, and you can go back and revisit it, and it's exactly like you want it to be. It's exactly like you remember. So there aren't too many things like that in life, for like a digital place that you can go and revisit that you used to hang out in.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I think it reminds me. It's almost like muscle memory. You go to an arcade, and that control panel, the button layout, everything is exactly the way you remember it being, and so you just get right to it. And I think it's just I think the other big thing is just that it's the simplicity of the games. These games were made for people to show up and not read any instructions, and they need to just figure out how to play it. And so it's kind of like riding a bike. When you come back, that muscle memory kicks in, that overall gamer memory kicks in, and you know exactly what to do. And so it's very comforting. I mean, obviously I still play modern games and everything, but when I get to an arcade, I just recently bought this cocktail table cabinet that has like 60 games in it or something like that, and it has a trackball and everything. And when I sit down, I can feel the muscle memory kicking in, or just my own memories kicking in. I know exactly what to do, and like my kids have been playing it, and they freak out about how good I am on these games, and I have to, and it's funny because I have to tell them, so we got to remember, when I was a kid, a game costs a quarter or 50 cents, and you learn to get really, really good because your goal was, how long can I play for a quarter? And so there was a lot at stake there as a kid, and so you get really good at it, and then now it's gotten to a point where like I have to kind of turn off that part of my brain when I play against my kids, because they get so mad at me when I beat them.
Because you're like, good, put a quarter up, let's go.
Exactly. I hit the tiger, and just, all right, I gotta back off.
My wife knows that the one way that she can always annoy me is she'll just come in. I'll be playing any game, whether it's arcade game, PC game, console game, and she'll just lean over and she'll go, "You want me to get you past this part?" And I just like, because that was like the worst thing you could say in an arcade to somebody. Like somebody's watching you play and they're so judging you, and I'm like, "No, I've got it." And then of course you lose a man or whatever. But yeah, the muscle memory is real. The sort of instant time tunnel is real. I feel the same way very much, where like I will play modern games or modern versions of arcade games, or arcade games on new cabinets, or with arcade joysticks hooked up to consoles, and I have to configure the buttons to match the original control panels as closely as I can. NBA Jam and NBA Hang Time, absolutely. I need to have my thumb and index and ring finger in the splayed sort of 3-button layout that's from the original cabinet, or else I can't play the game at all. I cannot get the shoulder buttons even on a controller to make. I'm just like, what's the closest I can get? It is a very unusual sort of physical memory that manifests when But again, there's an entire generation of gamers that are going to learn about it through films like Insert Coin, because they're not used to the idea of that. Long ago, I worked in video game magazines, and we would always get our readers writing in and saying, "What's your favorite console? What's your favorite machine? What's your favorite?" Because they wanted that validation, Oh yeah, the editors from that magazine play what I play, and they just wanted. And I would blow their minds, because I would say, my favorite video game machine of all time is a 400-pound piece of plywood designed to play one game. And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "And it's an arcade cabinet. Like anything in an arcade cabinet, I'm happier playing on an arcade cabinet. It's just a heck of a lot harder to lug around." But yeah, I'm right there with you. Ernie, I wanted to dip into a little bit of Ready Player One because, I enjoyed the book. I actually did just finish reading Ready Player Two. I really enjoyed the follow-up. You took the
Oh,
characters in
great.
very interesting places, I thought.
Thank you.
But for, a lot of people saw the movie from Ready Player One, and of course, my mind was exploding as I'm looking at all the cameos and all the characters that show up. There had to be at least a half a dozen Mortal Kombat characters that make cameos in the film. I know that Warner Brothers did the film, and I know that Warner Brothers currently owns the Mortal Kombat IP, so that probably made some of it easier. But were you at all involved in suggesting which characters could or should be used for those little snippets? I mean, Goro plays a significant
Yeah,
role
our
in one
Goro
major
is better than
scene.
the Goro in the Mortal Kombat movie because we had,
Right,
that's our first
right.
CGI
I'm not-
Goro. Yeah. Yeah, I got to, what was great, I kind of threw out all my ideas in the novel, and people were always looking for games that were mentioned in the novel to sneak into or anything mentioned in the novel to sneak into the movie. Like everybody who worked on the movie was a fan, and there were paperback copies of the book everywhere. So, but actually, in the actual production, I think it was mostly they would, I wasn't around a lot to suggest things to the special effects guys, and they were all sneaking in their favorite stuff. It was kind of licensed for everybody to sneak their favorite games or properties in. But I know Steven would do that. He's a big Missile Command fan, and he made sure that had a prominent cameo. I'll tell you guys my Missile Command Steven Spielberg story. He was
Please.
obsessed with breaking 1 million points on Missile Command. He told
Whoa.
me, and this is right when he was in pre-production for ET. So they had a little arcade there in Amblin with like 6-7 games, and one of them was Missile Command. He would go in there and play every day, and was trying to break 1 million points. Couldn't do it. Then he had to leave and go shoot ET. But he was so obsessed with Missile Command, he's like, bring this cabinet out into the woods. So they took it out into the woods and hooked it up to the production generators. And in between shots, he's over there playing Missile Command, and that's when he finally broke 1 million points. Was out in the redwood forest while they were shooting
Wow.
ET. That was my favorite high score
That's wild.
story ever. Yeah. So he's like a diehard video game fan as well. He used to play like LAN games with Robin Williams. They would go play Syndicate and other games, like in the 90s. He is an old school gamer all the way back to, he talked about playing in the little coin mech arcade that they had in Jaws. So he's all the way back to the pre-digital arcade. He was an arcade fan. So
Right.
it was just, and he drew all those kind of people around him. So it was like it was fun to celebrate every facet of 80s culture and sneak things. I'll watch that movie. It'll be on, and I'll still be spotting stuff in the background because the special effects guys were having so much fun.
So I think I want to end with a spin on the cliche question that every gamer is always asked, what's your favorite game? But given the subject matter and given the hobbyist nature of all of this, I'm not going to ask what your favorite game is. I want to ask what arcade machine from Midway is in your home. Because at this point, you must both have arcade machines in your homes.
I do. I don't think that I have. I have a Battle Zone, and I have a Tail Gunner 2, which is like the first sit-down cockpit cabinet. Yeah, I think I'm the only person I know that has a Tail Gunner 2.
I've never seen a Tail Gunner 2. I didn't even know there was. Tail Gunner is one of my favorite games. I didn't even know there was a second one.
It's such a great game. And well, the second one is just the same game as Tail Gunner, but put into a sit-down cabinet. There's no difference in the software. And I've got a Black Tiger. And then I've got emulators out the wazoo. I technically have every.
Sure.
I think I have every game in the 20th century. But but like you said, it's not the same as playing it on the original hardware and having the actual cabinet with the cigarette burns and the coke stains and all of that is like part of it. But I used to have Smash TV. I used to have a Zaxxon. They take up so much space. I've heard people refer to them as like the collecting of arcade games as Space Invaders. They slowly invade the space of your home, and but yeah, Smash TV was the only, I think, Williams that I ever owned, and once I made it to the Pleasure Domes, then I was like, I'm done. I'm selling this game. I've done it.
If you didn't have a Black Tiger, I would have been terribly disappointed to find out you didn't have a Black Tiger. Given that.
I'm looking for a Ninja Princess. I'm looking for a Ninja Princess now. If anybody's got
I would expect.
If anybody knows, has a Sega Ninja, but it was Ninja Princess overseas. Anybody knows where I can find one?
Contact Ernie Cline.
Yeah.
If you know. Josh, you mentioned that you just got a sort of a multi-cade, but do you have any of the original
Yeah, so I got yeah, so back at Midway, when you work on a game, at the end of production, you can actually buy a game and just pay the tax on it. And so, we got, all these arcade games. So I was able to get a WrestleMania the arcade game cabinet.
Oh, the
And
four
then
player.
no, that's WrestleFest. This is
Oh, okay.
the two-player one, but this we actually brought in the wrestlers and shot them Mortal Kombat style, which is crazy. So
Oh.
got to hang out with Undertaker, Yokozuna, Bam Bam, and so it was nuts. So that was the first arcade game I have. And then I have an Open Ice, which is the hockey version of NBA Jam, which was the second game I ever worked on. And so those are the two arcade games. There's a Mortal Kombat 4 that's in storage somewhere at my in Michigan, and then I have an NBA Jam board set that I want to convert my Open Ice to be able to kind of flip back and forth between the two. But yeah, like NBA Jam is my favorite game, so I recently got a board, and so I'm hoping to convert that.
That's interesting because that's what I have. I have an NBA Jam. I actually have GamePro's old NBA Jam machine.
Okay.
And I have a couple of different boards just screwed into the sides of the inside, so I just move the connector around. I've got Open Ice, and I usually run maximum hang time, but I also have NBA Jam TE 1.0 chipset with the forbidden Mortal Kombat secret characters. I'm very, but you hit my tripwire here. Of course, you have a Mortal Kombat 4, and Mortal Kombat 4 does not appear in the film. And yet you left out what I think is the most interesting story, which is you were Liu Kang. You were the model for Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat 4, and you managed to avoid that through the entire film. How did you get away with not putting yourself in the film as the person that people would recognize in real life as the polygonal Liu Kang?
You know what? It's funny because I didn't realize I didn't do that until after the film was done, because I actually put myself in the film as an Easter egg all over the movie. So you see me in NBA Jam, you see me in the Mortal Kombat segment, because I used my face in a bunch of Midway games back in the day. But yeah, Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat 4, that was the one that I missed. And later on, I was like, man, of all the obvious ones, that's the one I should have hit. But I have a really funny story about that. It's fairly not that recently, but a couple of years ago, I took my kids to this hot dog place in Chicago, and they really, up until that point, they didn't really know anything about my, video game pass and Midway and things like that. And they didn't even know I was in any games. And there was a Mortal Kombat 4 at this hot dog place. And I told them, I showed it to them. I was like, oh yeah, I worked on this game. I'm so surprised to see this here. And so I let them just, watch the attract mode, and I went to go get the hot dogs and stuff. And when I came back, they looked at me, and their faces were like white as ghosts. I'm like, whoa, what's up? And it's like, we just saw this guy tear your head off in this game. I was like, oh my God, they showed the fatalities in the attract mode, and it must have been my character getting killed.
Fantastic.
Wow. I was like, yeah, you know what? Don't tell your mother you saw that,
Right.
But now she knows. Now she's watching this and she knows. And
this is between you and me and the kid's therapist.
Those are some therapy bills, dude. Like, saw my dad's head get ripped off. Oh, that's rough.
Well, the therapist is going to be like, well, that's cool. We haven't heard that one before. That's thought it was just he didn't praise me when I got good grades on my credit. No, I just very rarely do we see people going, my parents were decapitated and I saw it. So so good for you. Well, in any case, we've talked a lot about the film, but you get to watch the film now. So if hopefully this has whetted your appetite. This is a fantastic journey back in time, but it should really, hopefully, help people appreciate what made these games so special. Josh, thank you very much for making the film and making the time. Ernie, thank you for being here and lending your expertise. It's fantastic. Woo! Yeah! You want to do a high five? Woo! Many things you can do in big screen. My name's Dan Amrick. It's been my pleasure to be here. Thanks very much. Enjoy the film. Grab some popcorn. Here we go.
Midway is the punk rock. They're like the Ramones or the Sex Pistols of the video game industry. The guys who are like, oh, this is how you think that we should do it. These are the rules that you think we should obey. Well, what if we go the other way?